Today on Poets at War, it is a manly episode with Ian Thomas Wilson talking about the importance of Western archetypes, taking responsibility, and martial arts. You are now entering the war zone. This is Poets at War.
I'm not sure if we'll leave it for the show or not. Of course, I record the whole thing and then decide what I put in. So it's one of those things. It's like, okay, whatever, you know. Um, Basically, an NFT is it's called non-fungible token, and it can be attached to a digital file, and basically, like if you try to replicate that digital file, you can, but the NFT does not go along with it. So essentially, it's certifying that this one is the original or this particular one, etc., and you're actually able to sell it as a collectible. Does that make sense?
Sure.
It's a form of crypto. It's a form of cryptocurrency that essentially, when you create a digital file, if you do it with create it with an NFT, it will allow you to sell it as this is this file. It's not a copy of a copy of a copy, right?
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? And so a lot of art people are creating just like random pictures of cats and junk and selling them for thousands of dollars. It's kind of ridiculous, but like the art world, it's a big thing right now for obvious reasons. Like you can own digital art as opposed to just owning a copy of digital art, right? You can own the original export of someone's art. You know what I'm saying?
Oh
so,
yeah.
so yeah, it
Okay. I guess that makes sense.
yeah, it does take a little bit of money up front for like processing and stuff like that. You can look up how to make an NFT and you'll find all kinds of answers, but it's basically cryptocurrency if the currency is a product, a good, you know what I'm saying? Like a digital product or a good.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting that way. I've been looking into them a little bit, but haven't made any concrete decisions, and it's still very much in its infancy. One of the really cool things that I found out about it is the you can set your NFT so that every time it is sold, you get a royalty for it as the originator of it. So basically, if someone sold a piece of your art, resold it for $100, and you set it to 10%, you would get $10 out of that transaction.
Oh, super.
Yep. So, but anyway, yeah, the the uh, the podcast we're doing is very wide open, casual. Like I record the whole thing and then just decide where I'm going to start, basically. Um, and the main stuff we're going to be getting into is kind of the at least the general theme of what we're getting into is the idea of where what you do art with art, truth, beauty, etc., and how that all fits into the culture war,
Okay.
and that sort of a thing. So why don't you introduce yourself and just talk about what it is you do?
All right. Uh, my name is Ian Wilson, and I am a chronic. Um, I guess you'd call it like you'd say I didn't know what to do with my life. uh, I'm a comic artist and a writer. I've done Bible illustrations. I've done. Uh, I have an ongoing comic book project called Legend of the Swordbearer, web comic project. I've written a couple of novellas. Uh, First one being A Song of Emrys, and the second one is The Sword of Emrys, which is that's going that's in the process of being rewritten right now because realized after a couple of people had read it and said, you made some mistakes here and there. So I had to go and basically reword everything from the ground up. And so that's getting re-released the 1st of October.
Cool. So what are your stories about?
That,
Like what's the theme, sort of a thing that you're going with on all those?
well, the Emrys stories are about King Emrys, who was a historical king. He actually existed, as far as anyone can tell, in the 5th century. He was the uncle of King Arthur, and he was the first High King of England. And he has these adventures that nobody actually talks about. Nobody wrote hardly anything about him. So I'm basically making up mythology as I go along, because there's nothing there. I mean, he fought some battles against the Saxons, and he did some cool magic tricks, and then that's it. He disappears from the record.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I I thought, it'd be nice if there were more stories about him.
For sure. Yeah, the thing that I really like about those, I'm going through and recording the audiobooks for you. The thing that really struck me with these is they feel very, very fast paced. They feel adventurous. They remind me of like if a King Arthur sort of a thing met sort of an Indiana Jones sort of vibe. Some of the humor in particular
Yeah.
reminded me a lot of Indiana Jones. Um, Very action based humor. So I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was pretty heavily influenced by Indiana Jones and things like that as a kid.
hmm So
So that was one of the things that went in there.
yeah, totally. So what are some of the other projects you're involved with? I know Logosofia, Sarah mentioned you in the podcast. You want to tell people what you do for Logosofia?
Um, it's hard to describe what all I do. I did uh, for Logosofia. I'm the um, assistant editor. I had to think of the word there for a minute. I'm the assistant editor of Logosofia. I run the Twitter for Logosofia. I pretty much run the Facebook page. I don't. Uh, Sarah still does a lot of things with that, but I'm basically in charge of making sure that the posts go out when they should. Um, as far as the website goes, I don't really do much for the website. Aside from contributing the odd short story here and there. That's the other project I'm working on. So I'll get to that later.
I gotcha.
But that's what I do for Logosophia.
Yeah. So what do you see basically like why do you write these works? Why do you draw the comics? You mentioned kind of this idea of you've always been looking for something to do. But like what are some of the things that make you think that this is a worthwhile adventure and investment in what you do? And what generally speaking, like tell them about like your plans. Where is this all going? What's the purpose?
So my plans right now, as it stands, part of the reason that I do this is because we're in an age where there are so many, so many, so many books being produced by people who really don't know what they're doing. And I'm not going to claim that I know what I'm doing. Obviously I had to rewrite an entire novella from the ground up. And there are all these books being produced, and they all have basically the same sorts of themes. Now, I have no problem with Hero's Journey. I think it's a great archetype to work off of. But once you've done it a few hundred million different times, and it's all just variations on a theme, the way I look at it, people are thirsting for adventure and they're drowning in all this content that may or may not be what they're looking for. You have these people that are quote unquote subverting tropes. Well, tropes exist for a reason. Tropes have a cultural purpose to serve. So, one of the tropes that I like the best is the idea of a ideal king, somebody who is not necessarily perfect, but someone who's going to do what's necessary to save the kingdom. So you have characters like King Arthur, and they're highly important culturally, especially in Western culture, but to a lesser extent in the East. It's really, really important to keep those traditions alive. And what a lot of fantasy authors nowadays, I don't see a lot of them doing that. They're too busy trying to be original rather than actually producing good art that people actually want to read. So I went back and I read John Carter of Mars, I read Conan the Barbarian, I read all of the old pulp heroes that were really popular in the 1920s and the 1930s. And they all seem to have these certain features in common, where you have these men that are not necessarily like buff jocks, but are men of action and adventure who are going to do what's necessary to protect the people they love. And they're always gentlemen, they're always kind to women, and they take care of the people that they love. And sometimes they do things out of selfish ambition, and sometimes they do things to help people. And I wanted to bring back that type of hero. Now, I found out from Twitter that there are other authors out there who are basically doing the same thing that I'm doing, but they're not as well known as I think that they should be. Ideally, I would like to do a 4-part series with Emrys, and then I'm going to move on to Uther and do probably a 3-part series with him. And then I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do after that with the Camelot idea. I don't know if I'm going to produce more Camelot themed books after that. I don't know if I'm going to do more Legend of the Swordbearer stuff. I may move on and do something different, but we'll see.
Yeah, that sounds great. So one of the things that really kind of stuck with me there, what you were talking about, the idea of the person who does what it takes, who takes care of his people, who isn't perfect but tries his hardest all the time. And
Yeah.
yeah, the whole shades of gray thing. I remember you mentioning something like that on Facebook. People talking about writing in shades of
Yeah.
gray and always trying to have a very flawed hero as opposed to a partially flawed hero or something of that nature. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons, there was such a, there's a certain group of people who want this. And a lot of people downplay that group because they believe that group is dying out when in fact they're actually slowly growing again.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons I think so many people latched on to Captain America in the Marvel movies. He
Yeah.
was very anachronistic and specific in his philosophy of fighting, and I think that I think some people latched onto it too much and didn't give enough credence to another hero who was that way in the beginning, and that was Thor. um, but yeah, it's interesting to me how certain people at the right times find these uh not necessarily tropes, but these patterns that have been slowly dying from fiction and how they begin to bring them back. The one that I'm particularly fond of, I have found out through a lot of searching is the idea of um, essentially a an Im, an imperfect, and this one's resonating a lot with people my age right now, an imperfect father figure who still very 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 much loved his kids, and the damage that has been done is undone by the good that was done in the first place that the kid didn't even know about. Um, I find that trope to be something particularly strong, and even though it's overused in a lot of cases currently, I think there's more there that people aren't delving into. What, in your opinion, is the epitome of this kind of hero you're talking about? That you're talking about specifically in you mentioned some of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, if I remember correctly, and John Carter of Mars and things of that nature. What is like this is exactly what I'm going for, like the closest thing you can say to the epitome.
Oh boy. It would either be John Carter of Mars or Kull the Conqueror.
Hmm. I'm not as familiar with Cold
Not a lot of
Conqueror. You want
people
to go into him?
not a lot of people are familiar with him. I mean, he's primarily associated with Kevin Sorbo movie in the 90s. He was actually Robert E. Howard, who created Conan the Barbarian. He created Kull the Conqueror first.
Mm-hmm.
And Kull was this character. I don't know a whole lot about his backstory, but he was a barbarian, like Conan the Barbarian. Basically, Atlantis fell, and the survivors returned to barbarism. And Kull is one of those people, one of the surviving Atlanteans, who worked his way up from literally nothing and became the king of the empire. He became the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And he was incredibly savage in battle. But when somebody was in danger, he was right there. He was going to do whatever it took. There was a slave girl who had fallen in love with this nobleman, and they couldn't get married because the law said they couldn't get married. And Kull was so irritated by the fact that he lived in a reality where he was restricted by ancient laws written by fools, in his opinion, that he just took the tablets of the law and hit them with an axe and shattered them to pieces.
Hmm. That, yeah, I can see that. It's a very specific kind of person who kind of says, screw the tradition. We need to do what's right. That seems to be kind of what you're getting at with that. Yeah, and I can see that in your work. So, what is your hope to accomplish with this work? Obviously, selling it and making money, and I even want to go into that. I don't want to discount that. I really don't. You laugh, but like so many people discount that as a noble goal. The fact is, it is noble if you're trying to take care of things.
Eating is a noble goal.
Exactly. It's extremely noble. So I don't want to discount that. And I want people to support folks like you and the other people I have on this podcast, and especially if they think this work sounds interesting. But like, what showing this person in a story, showing this archetype in a story, what are you hoping for it to accomplish within the culture war that we see going on today?
Well, I want to give young men in particular positive role models. Uh, in my grandfather's generation, they had Tarzan. My grandfather was a big fan of Tarzan. My dad was a big fan of Tarzan. And that gave them a positive role model because despite the fact that he was raised by apes, he treated people with respect. He was always respectful to ladies. But if you crossed him, heaven help you. And I want young men who are Zoomers and the next generation coming up to have male role models where they can say, I'm not going to treat women like that. I'm not going to be a savage to women. I'm going to defend my family. I'm going to put food on the table the best that I can, you know, and just be masculine without being a muscle head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's so many people equate. I even saw a tweet recently. Someone had said, and someone refuted them, the idea that some literary person was saying to a commenting on some fitness guy's picture that, oh, every single one of those veins on your arm is 100 books you haven't read, or something like that. And I'm like, that's a really reductionist idea of time. It's extremely stupid. And the guy got refuted big time. But
Yeah,
that's something that I really see is people want to, especially in the culture war, especially from the Marxist circles and things of that nature. People, we even see it in our fiction. People want to be put into factions. People want to associate with this faction or that faction, and this faction is my
yeah,
identity. Right. And what you're advocating for really is a mold breaker. Someone
yeah,
who uses the hand that he's dealt, like a great Western trope, whatever hand he's dealt, he's still the fastest gun in the West, right? Like that's kind of the thing. So I I think that comes, correct me if I'm wrong, from a little bit of who you are and the way you've been brought up. Do you want to go into that a little bit and just kind of give people a background on who you are?
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, so my dad is one of those people who is physically extremely strong. I mean, I've seen him move some really heavy stuff. And you look at him and he's got arms like a gorilla. I'm not even kidding. So, but he reads. He uh just finished Dracula. Now he's about halfway through Frankenstein. He's read more books than I ever have. Granted, he's my father, so he's significantly older. But by the time he was my age, he had written or read hundreds and hundreds of books. And you can be intellectual and still be physically strong. You can be intellectual and still be physically fit. And a lot of the people that I run into at Comic Cons and whatnot, they don't they don't do that for whatever reason. They think that if you're a nerd, then you have to be nerdly. You can't go to the gym. You can't do this. Uh, you can't be a jock. And I'm just like, no, you can read comic books and still play football. You can read comic books and still do karate. I certainly do. I've been doing karate for 7 years. So he instilled in me a love of high action literature and a love of fitness. As a
Yeah.
teenager, that was a bit that was a bit more difficult because I was strong headed and I wanted to do my own thing. And he just kind of said, "Okay, well, you're fine, do whatever you want." But it caught on later. Pardon me.
Yeah, definitely.
So I turned 20. I turned 21, and I had just gotten fired from my first real 9 to 5 job at the YMCA. I'm not going to get into that because that's water under the bridge now. And, actually, no, I am going to get it.
Well, let's go.
So as I look back now, this is 7 years since I've been fired from the Y. As I look back now, I realize that there were hundreds of situations that were I put in them again, I would handle completely differently. I had no idea what I was doing. Nobody trained me. I didn't know what exactly they expected of me. They expected me to do
What
there.
was your job?
for a lot of time. I was just basically glorified hall monitor.
I gotcha.
I was just there to make sure that the kids didn't do anything dangerous and that they were entertained. I was a high paid babysitter basically,
I'm
and
following. Yeah.
there were lots of times when I just went, why? Why are they allowed to do this? And if they had a sob story bad enough, then the director would just let them get away with murder,
Hmm.
essentially. And there were a lot of things that I did that I look back and think, oh boy, I would not do that again. And I could have gotten in a lot of trouble for doing that. Nothing criminal,
Right.
you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
I understand why they fired me now because I was not cut out for that job at all.
You hadn't learned
So
to
I
be the
got fired.
gentleman archetype you were looking for.
Yeah, exactly. I was fired and I was mad. And Dad said, "Why didn't you go to karate class?" And I said, "No." And Dad said, "Fine, I'll take you to the karate class, and you can watch, and decide if you want to do it." So I watched, and I decided, okay, yeah, I'll do this. And that's how I got involved with martial arts.
I gotcha.
And I've been doing that. I've been doing that week in and week out, almost nonstop for 7 years. I mean, the last year there was no karate class, so because the world ended.
Fantastic. I know there's yeah, right. I know there's been there's different, uh groups and variants and whatever else, and I don't know near enough about karate to understand it, but what level belt are you and how does that fit into your hierarchy?
Well,
If you do belts.
I mean, we do belts. In my previous school, now I changed schools a couple of years ago. That's another story that I'm definitely not going to get into because we are not going to have time.
Oh, I've had my own in martial arts. There's so much drama there.
Yeah, well, okay. So there was some drama. I ended up leaving that school. In that school, it went white, yellow, orange, green, blue, brown, black. And that's how it is in the school that I'm currently in.
Hmm.
I'm a black belt, first degree.
Hmm.
I have to train for a while in my current school, and then I'm going to test in which case I'll be a black belt, first degree again.
I gotcha.
Because I have to become part of their hierarchy, and there's a process for going from a
From one
black belt
school,
in
yeah.
one school to a black belt in another school.
That
I
makes
got to
sense.
keep my black belt, fortunately, but I have to test in.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I
That's
gotcha.
going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine. Yep. That might as well tell you because this is a conversation. You'd be interested in this. I did I did jujitsu for a short while because I was fascinated by both professional wrestling and the older form catch wrestling, which is professional wrestling back before, when it was real. Um, and so, which I'm not saying that pro wrestling isn't real in that it's very severe on the body, obviously, but because I actually trained in both. The uh, the jujitsu was out of necessity because the only way I could learn any catch wrestling was the internet and my brothers. Um, and jujitsu was the next closest thing. So, okay. So I go and I do jujitsu, and we had a whole issue where essentially I was um sort of kind of pressured out in a way out of coming to class because I was framed as a bully because of the way that I uh wrestled, the way that I grappled. Particularly the use of leg locks at all in any beginner situations. Now, keep in mind, I had been training, self-trained in catch wrestling and trained in pro wrestling quite a bit for about 3, 4, or 5 years, something like that. and I knew how to hurt person and not hurt a person, especially because of the pro wrestling, and they they kind of know that, they kind of don't care, it's one of those things because they're their own group of fighter, they do their own style. And so
Yeah.
the couple times I tried a leg lock, one time it was on someone much smaller because we didn't have enough people to roll, and I had a parent as well as the teacher just like immediately jump on me, like physically, because I was going for a very benign
Yeah.
leg lock.
Yeah.
So,
That's
and this was like the first time. It wasn't like a second
like,
time or something like that, But yeah.
yeah. That's not unlike what happened to me. We were supposed to be doing, don't know how to explain this. Kata in karate is
I
just
know what kata
basically,
is, yeah. You can explain it for the others.
well, yeah, you know, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna explain. Kata is a sequence of uh, movements that simulate combat. We train in kata for a lot of different reasons. I'm not going to get into all of that. You can look it up yourself for why people do kata. People do kata for their own reasons. But anyway, we were supposed to be doing kata, we being the black belts. And um, the sensei's wife kept stopping and talking to one of her best friends, and I was getting exasperated, and I was already kind of in a poor mood that day.
Mm-hmm.
And she finally had, and she chewed me out in front of all the black belts. Eh,
Yep.
yeah, and basically I decided that I wasn't going to go back because I was so just utterly humiliated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I switched dojos, and this one has more of a professional atmosphere, I
Mm-hmm.
guess I would say. There's a greater sense of professionalism.
Right. Well, that's one of those things, there I think people value safety so much in our society today, or at least the illusion of safety, that they don't have a strong idea of why they value the thing beyond the safety, like the thing that is kept safe. you know um
That's an interesting thought.
yeah, basically the idea that, like, I'm more concerned about the safe in which I put my gold than I am about the gold itself. These procedures and things that we do in life, especially in things like the combat, like I'm talking about, we're so afraid of mass crazy scary injuries that we don't even come anywhere close to seeing where those could happen. You know, we want to stay absolutely as far away as possible. The way our society has dealt with, justice in the justice system, you can sue for slipping on the floor at Walmart, you know, things of that nature. It's like there's no personal responsibility. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. That's the other thing. Taking responsibility for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It just, don't ask me to take responsibility for other people. I'm not about that.
And then
But
taking
you better take.
responsibility. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just saying, and taking
You can go
responsibility for
better.
something that, like, doesn't even hasn't even happened. It's something that could have happened. Like, that's what they want. They want you to take responsibility for things that haven't even happened. But, like,
Thought crime.
yeah,
Thought crime.
it's
You,
crazy.
you better take responsibility for yourself.
Hmm.
I'm certainly not going to do it for you.
Right, right.
That's why I like. Oh, let me think of his name. It's completely gone now. I can see his face in my head. He's a he has a radio show. Not
Dave
Joe Rogan.
Ramsey.
Uh, Oh, dang it! What is his
Is he
name?
conservative talk radio or?
Jocko Willink.
Okay, gotcha.
Jocko Willink.
Mhm.
That's why I like him because he's about radical responsibility. If somebody on your team screws up, that's on you because you didn't communicate clearly.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
Yep.
he was a SEAL, so
Yeah.
he knows all about that.
And this connects to everything
So
you're saying about this archetype, right? Like this archetype of a man
yeah,
who's taking responsibility for his people.
yeah, you take a responsibility for yourself.
Mm-hmm. So you and your sister have done, I mean, not as many lately, but you go to cons, you do all sorts of things. Why don't you give us a brief introduction to your sister and what you guys partner on? I know that I'm gonna have her on later and I'll let her do more of the explaining on her stuff, but like you both kind of grew up doing art together, right? You want to go into that a little bit?
Pretty much, pretty much. My sister writes, I guess you call them urban fantasy stories,
Mm-hmm.
where she has modern, modern American normal people alongside elves and dwarves and other magical creatures. And they all sort of live together in the same environment. And which I find it fairly interesting myself. And what I do for her is I basically do the illustrations for it. Her stories are illustrated, and I do that. And that's pretty much all I have to say on the subject.
We'll leave the rest for her. Her name is TK
Yeah,
Tamra, right? Mm-hmm. And
yeah.
she's pretty awesome at what she does too. You guys are a talented family. Um, so if people are, wanting to get a hold of your art, I know a podcast is, especially audio podcast, isn't going to be able to show what kind of art you have, but like if people want to see your art, where can they go to, and can you describe your art a little bit just to give your like your approach to what you do artistically?
So as far as my art is concerned, I pull from a lot of artistic influence. My main influence would probably be Jack Kirby, who was the main artist for Marvel Comics in the 60s and early 70s. Other influences include um, John Buscema. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. A couple of other artists from the Silver and Gold Age comics. Hergé. I get a lot of my ideas from Hergé. Moebius. I really like Moebius's artwork. Just some of the way that he was able to portray shapes so that they look three-dimensional. They look round, like you could touch them and feel them, and they almost look like you could reach into his illustrations and feel them.
Yep.
And I'm trying to kind of do that with my own artwork, and so I'm learning a lot from him. But my art is sort of a combination of all those things. It's kind of evolving right now because I've been learning more about comic art and how to make shapes look three-dimensional.
Gotcha. Yep. That's, from what I hear, one of the hardest parts. I do this weird digital
It
painting thing, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna get it as good as it gets. But go ahead.
Yeah, it is very difficult. It's something that I've struggled with for, I don't know, years of my life. And I look at some of my older artwork for like Legend of the Swordbearer stuff that I've already published and think, I could have done that a lot better. But that was 5 years ago when I started that project. So
Exactly.
I've learned a lot in 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. Um, we didn't touch a lot on this on faith. I know you consider yourself Reformed Catholic. and have a few interesting, uh, you're not Roman, but you're Protestant to an extent, but you're also, kind of all over the place. You've always been somewhat of a searcher, from what I understand. Reading the scripture, figuring things out. You want to go back into your background and how your faith has affected the way you look at art and that sort of a thing.
Well, I started out as a Southern Baptist, and they don't really do artwork just in general. It's not a thing for them.
Yeah.
If you Not visual artwork.
Hmm.
If you play guitar or piano or organ or something, they are all over you. But if you draw pictures, they just kind of put you in a corner and give you a crayon. That's pretty much how they treat that. And I'm not mad at them. I'm not bitter about it.
Hmm.
It is what it is.
Right.
So I went from there, and we started going to a congregational church. Now, a congregational church, for a lot of people that don't realize what that is, I'm finding out that there are so many people out there that don't know what congregational means.
Right.
They were started in Britain by people that didn't agree with the Church of England, but also weren't necessarily Presbyterian. They were known as nonconformists.
Right.
And they moved to the United States on board the Mayflower and those famous ships that we read about. They started the Massachusetts Bay Colony and places like that. And that's where Puritanism came out of. Now there were congregational churches started all over New England.
American
A lot of them
Puritanism, anyway.
American Puritanism all over New England. They started these congregational churches. A lot of them are unfortunately Unitarian Universalists now because of some stuff that happened in, I don't know, the 19th century.
The
I'm not
spiritualism
sure what all.
movement, and yeah.
Yeah, the spiritualism movement that took place there. I'm not sure exactly what all happened, but they kind of became disillusioned with um, congregationalism. They became disillusioned with Reformed Christianity.
Hmm.
Basically they gave up on God essentially. So
Yeah.
they started worshiping a god of their own making for all intents and purposes. And so that's where I go to church, and they had a building. The building is absolutely gorgeous
Hmm.
inside and out. It is a huge stone building. You go inside, it's got stained glass windows with pictures of the apostles and Jesus Christ and Mary and other people from the history of Christianity in the windows. And you just feel like you're in a little bit of heaven on earth.
Hmm.
And finally, my artistic abilities seem to be respected.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. So
So
you go to a congregationalist
that's
church, yeah. Are there, and I'm not trying to get you in any weirdness with them in any kind of way, but like, what are the big tenets of your faith doctrinally that have driven your art and where you are now, theologically, etc.?
so my congregational church is really, really old.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people that go there now were going there in the 1940s and the 50s. And
Right.
it's kind of aging out, unfortunately.
That's
And
so
a
many
discussion
churches
for
now. Yeah. That's hard.
That's a discussion for another time.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is, technically speaking, our church holds to the Westminster Confession of Faith. That's what it says in our Constitution. That's what it says in our founding documents. Unfortunately, a lot of people that go to the church don't believe in that.
Right.
So that kind of informs my own faith and practice. I went through a wandering period over the past, I don't know, 3 years, where I was looking at different church traditions, what these people are interesting. What do they believe? Oh, look, they've got big long beards. What do they believe? And
Right.
just doing lots of research on different church backgrounds. I flirted with Catholicism for a while. I was very, very interested in Lutheranism. Eventually, I came back to First Congregational, even though I never actually left.
Right.
I I sort of came back to that because I felt like I didn't have anywhere else to go. Like God was saying, I put you in this church for a reason, and
Yes.
I want you to do as much good here as you can, and don't go looking around anywhere else right now.
Yes. Definitely. So what is, I mean, not from a CRT perspective where the victim gets to say all they want to say, but but what are your thoughts and opinions on how elders in particular of churches, people who are actually in control and power and authority over the congregation, how should they be dealing with a crazy weird artist person? Not just visual art, but someone who um, is constantly, I'm joking and being hyperbolic here, but hears the voices and follows them.
um, be patient.
Hmm.
You have to be patient with artistic people. You have to you have to kind of let them have their own head, and they have ideas. They have lots of ideas. They have ideas flowing into their head every day. And they can give you those ideas, but you have to ask. Because they're not just going to blurt them out. Because in a lot of cases, when they did blurt out those ideas, they were kind of shouted down or told that they were irrelevant or they were bad ideas and what have you.
Hmm.
So you have to take advantage of that brain, because artistic people have great brains. Take advantage of that. Ask them questions about what they want to do in the church. Or if your church is trying to start a ministry, you have to go to the artistic person, the weird wild-haired guy, and say, do you have any opinions about this? Do you have any ideas of about how you think we should go about this? Or do you think that this ministry is a terrible idea? And encourage them to speak their mind, because a lot of times artists are very polite, and they aren't not polite, nice. They aren't necessarily going to tell you exactly what they think, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They're looking for acceptance, and a lot of times they've moved around from congregation to congregation, not finding the acceptance that they're looking for. So you have to be sensitive to that and listen, and don't interrupt them, and don't try to tell them that's a terrible idea or what have you. And don't give artistic people suggestions on what they should do. I was told over and over again that I should do gospel tracts, do illustrations for gospel tracts. And the more they told me to do illustrations for gospel tracts, the less I wanted to do it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Just don't give them suggestions. Let them come up with their own ideas, because that's what they're good at.
Yep. I think I'll add to that too. If you don't like their ideas, you're the one who's the elder. You don't have to use them. You know, I think it's
Yeah.
less for an artist about having themselves utilized or their ideas utilized, even though that's a part of it. That's something that they eventually want to get to. Just knowing, loving, and trying to understand, just like most humans. That's the first foremost thing. And I'm not trying to put people in different camps here, like we were talking about at the beginning. I think everyone has an artistic quality to them, no matter what level they're at. Everyone has ideas, like you were saying. Everyone has these sorts of things. It's just, we don't need to be putting someone in an elite category, but at the same time, we do need to acknowledge that this is a person with ideas and thoughts and stories or songs or whatever that they have, and try to utilize them to the glory of the kingdom of God. My pastor uses the term making and maturing disciples. That's his job. And
Yeah.
whatever disciple. Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes they need a little encouragement to do what the Lord has for them to do,
Yeah.
because a lot of times people, writers in particular, are very good at writing sermons, for example, and they might be looking for somebody to tell them, hey, you should become you should get some theological education, and then you could be I don't know, in your church you have elders, right?
Right.
And they're the ones that are allowed to preach.
Not exactly. There is a difference between a ruling and a preaching elder. And that is just basically like a preaching elder is definitely 100% paid, and they are given over to the work. Some ruling elders are paid too, but like a preaching elder has to be paid, and he has to be like his primary job is being in the word, as opposed to the shepherding and that sorts of other things. That doesn't mean that they don't do that too, and it doesn't mean that a ruling elder never teaches, but preaching is teaching the word with passion, and with definite purpose toward the word. So
Okay, yeah. Well, in Congregationalism, we're a bit more open with that. Basically, anyone who has some form of theological education is allowed to preach,
right.
and that's at the discretion of the pastor and the deacons who gets to preach and who doesn't.
Right.
So we can elect someone to be a preacher.
Well, right, like I said, that can happen. That can happen, but there's a distinction made between like this is the guy whose job it is to do this versus here's a guy filling in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So with writers in particular, you can make use of that. You can walk up to them and say, "Hey, you have a lot of theological insight. I want you to preach on thus and such a date. I'm
Mhm.
going to be out of town." That's basically what my pastor said to me not that long ago.
Right. Right. And even if it's not preaching, teaching Sunday school, there's so many
Yeah,
different places where these things could happen, and it doesn't even have to be in the realm of teaching, but people who are already creative, there's so many things outside of the standard sort of thing. I'm actually working currently with my pastor on pre-production for an audio drama that we're going to be shopping around to various radio stations and that sort of a thing, to just have our name connected to it. Just as
nice.
a public relations. Here's a story. It has good Christian morals in it, but it's a good story, and that's what we're working on. So it doesn't even have to be something directly connected with liturgy. There's so many things that the church can do. All of Christ for all of life, as Abraham Kuyper would say, right? Like there's
Yeah.
so much work that an artist can do, and I don't want anyone who's listening to think that, oh, this guy's really good, but like he's kind of weird. How can I fit him? No, don't worry about fitting him in. Work on finding where he fits in the world and help him with that. And then the rest will make itself work out. If he's in the world and in the church, there's going to be connection there, and you can find that connective tissue pretty easily. Honestly, I think people just don't think outside the box. They don't want to listen to other folks that think outside the box, and so it's like, okay, well, but anyway, we've rambled on a good bit. I want to know where people can find you on the internet, especially if they want to connect and become friends and all that stuff, but also just, where they can find your work. And guys, he's a really great artist and he needs commissions. So listen up closely. Go ahead.
Yep, I definitely need money. So the primary place where you can contact me is on my wonderful website that Joshua made for me, ianthomaswilson.com. And there's my Twitter, The Great Scott, great with an 8, GR8, Scott on Twitter. Facebook, I'm Great Scott with an exclamation point Productions. And then I have another website that I can't remember off the top of my head.
Legendsandsongs.weebly.com.
Legendsandsongs.weebly.com. That's it. So those are the places where you can contact me and see my artwork and buy my books. Buy my books, please.
Yes. His books are really awesome, y'all. I'm telling you. And the audiobook I'm hoping to have out for the Christmas season for sure, completely and totally ready. So if you're looking for a good novella length audiobook, that's our collaboration together with the A Song of Emrys. So Ian, thanks. And everybody who's listening, remember, Christians, you're a part of the culture wars, whether you like it or not. You are part of God's army, whether you like it or not. Time to stand up, time to draw, write, and sing for God's glory. Let's march into battle. God of songs, said the warrior pride, though all the world betray. Sword at least I right shall guard one faithful